Hi guys, Matt here. Welcome back to Ranger Reviews, and today we're going to be wrapping up the MMPR era by taking a look at Season 3. Thank you for all the support on the videos so far. One question that I did get in the comments on the Season 2 video that I just wanted to answer briefly. Somebody asking if I will be reviewing Dino Thunder. The answer is yes, I will, because I'm intending to review every season eventually. I can't be sure when I will get around to it because, I'll be doing each season chronologically and there's no real schedule on when the videos are going to go up. But yes, I will definitely be getting to Dino Thunder and in fact every other season at some stage. So let's get into Season 3, and we begin with a three-parter called A Friend in Need, where the Rangers, minus an unwell Kimberly, travel to Alpha's home planet of Edenoi after he gets a distress call. It basically acts as a backdoor pilot for another Saban-produced tokusatsu show called Most Rider. However, aside from one brief mention from Rocky much later on this season, neither show actually mentions each other again, so you kind of wonder what the point was of them doing it in the way that they did. The season really gets going in a four-parter called Ninja Quest. Now, storyline wise, the MMPR movie is basically an alternative version of Ninja Quest, hence why I haven't really spoken much about it, because it's not in canon with the TV show. And here we're introduced to a new member of the villain faction called Rito Revolto, who is Rita's brother and a total idiot, albeit a hilarious one. He's constantly bumbling and calling Zed Ed, much to his constant irritation. It's kind of funny. As a wedding present to Rita and Zed, took him long enough, he plants some eggs on the moon. These eggs eventually hatch into the new foot soldiers called the Tenga Warriors, which are basically giant birds. One of the eggs doesn't hatch until much later, and it turns out that this one is a particularly fiendish monster called the Vampirus. Even Finster seems pretty disgusted by the Vampirus monster. Now, despite his idiocy, Russo's fighting prowess proves to be on a par with Goldar, and he shows this the very first time he engages the Rangers in battle. Basically, he leads a group of monsters in an ambush and completely destroys the Thunderzords. Now, it's pretty horrifying seeing the Megazords quite literally breaking apart. You see parts of the Zords falling off and wires exposed, and it's pretty extraordinary to see. With the destruction of the Zords, the Rangers are also stripped of their powers, so they're forced to walk back to the command center, and once they're there, Zordon tells them about the Temple of Ninja, which is supposedly a legend. He's not 100% sure that it actually exists. This, according to the legend, this temple is located in the Desert of Despair. Now, you'll remember last season that it was revealed that Zordon Alpha simply found the power coins. They didn't actually create them. It turns out that it was actually Ninja that was the original creator of the coins. And I think it's quite good when they do cover things like that. It teaches a bit more about the power's origins. So the Rangers travel through the Desert of Despair, which very much lives up to its name. At one point they actually have to rescue Aisha from quicksand, and they also have their first fight against the Tengas, which goes about as well as the first time the original team fought against the Pussies. They're forced to retreat into a cave, but they finally end up reaching the temple. Now, initially, Ninja refuses to believe them and is pretty dismissive of them, but after Tommy makes a speech about how they will carry on fighting powers or not, this causes Ninja to have a change of heart and he gives them the new powers and Zords. And as well as those new powers and Zords, the Rangers are also given some pretty cool looking new outfits, completely made out of their respective colour. And these ninja outfits basically act as an alternative morphed form which they can transform into when they're fighting the Tengers. So eventually they do manage to fight off the Tengers and using the new Zords defeat the Vampirus. And from this point on we also see Ninja act as an ally to the Rangers in battle, arriving flying in on a cloud. Now, we all know that Power Rangers does some pretty brilliantly goofy stuff, but I think the idea of this ancient wise wizard arriving in battle on a cloud, I just absolutely love. I think it's hilarious, personally. During this four-parter, we also get the next stage in the development of the real heroes here, Bulk and Skull. They decide to join the Junior Police Patrol, originally with the intention of impressing women, although ultimately their motivation is to impress Lieutenant Stone, a new character who is training them, and gain his respect. This is really good development for them because not only do we see them taking their role seriously, we also see them respecting an authority figure, which is completely different to the pair that we saw just a couple of years prior. And the next episode is essentially a filler called A Brush with Destiny, but much in the same way as the subplot with the Junior Police Patrol shows the development of Bulk and Skull, I think this episode and a lot of what we see later on shows some really good character development for Kimberly. Basically, she reveals that her mum is engaged to an artist, but because he lives in Paris, it means the family would have to move there. And I think this shows Kimberly's development because I think season 1 Kimberly probably wouldn't have had any problem with giving up her power coin, but her immediate thought this time around is, well, I'm a Power Ranger, I can't just quit. And even with plot elements later on, she shows how much she genuinely cares about being a Ranger. So I think that is really good development from Kimberly's point of view. Something that, let's say, it's essentially a filler, but I think it's something worth discussing. We do get a few more filler episodes and, for better or worse, a Christmas episode, which is best skipped over. But we then have a 9-episode story arc comprising 3 multi-parters and a filler, which all form one continuous story. This begins with a 2-parter called A Ranger Catastrophe, and it sees Rita unleash a pretty unusual plan, which involves a white cat, which Kimberly and Aisha adopt after finding it in the park. We discover that Aisha's been volunteering at an animal shelter, so initially she takes the cat to the shelter, but partially thanks to some interference from Rito, nobody claims the cat, so they adopt it. We learn while all this is going on that the cat is in fact an Australian blonde called, funnily enough, Kat, or Catherine, who is in alliance with Rita and Zed. Later on, Kat tricks Tommy into helping her with her car, and Tommy ends up in another dimension. After defeating a cat monster, which is Catherine transformed, the other Rangers manage to free Tommy from the dimension. We next move on to changing of the Zords, where Rita instructs Kat to steal Kimberly's power coin while the Rangers are distracted at the beach by some Tengers, and this is where we learn a lot more about the power coins and the sort of mythology behind them. Basically, the power coins are connected to the Rangers' natural human energy, and Kimberly's coin, being in evil hands, greatly weakened. So you can see her physically struggling win the fight, and in her weakened state, that leads to the Tengers kidnapping her. The fact that Rita and Zed have possession of the pink power coin then enables Kat to enter the Falcon Zord and steal it, as well as enabling Rita and Zed to kidnap Ninjal. So at this point, the Rangers are in major trouble. You know, quite why the Falcon Zord being captured renders the Ninja Zords inoperable, I'm not entirely sure. But the point is, they can't use their Zords. One of them but has been captured, as has Ninjal. So things are looking pretty bad at this stage. And we also see Finster, along with Squat and Babu, actually do something right for once. Doesn't happen often, as they manage to locate a fleet of dormant Zords known as the Shogun Zords. And it's at this point that we see what for me is one of the standout moments of the entire 3-year MMPR run. So somehow Lord Zed manages to contact the Rangers through the viewing globe and instructs them to teleport him to the command center in order to discuss his demands for Kimberly's ransom. And you have to say, it's pretty chilling seeing Zed in the command center itself. He's literally on stage, just stood on top of the consoles, gloating at the Rangers. It's quite a remarkable moment, and when he's being teleported in, you can see the place completely shaking, and everyone is visibly terrified just simply by the guy being there. You know, you really do get the sense that everything is heightened, perhaps in a way that it hasn't really been before. So after taunting the Rangers a bit, Zed reveals his demands, that he wants the Rangers to pilot the Shogun Zords, and if they don't agree, he will ultimately destroy Kimberly, who is currently hooked up to this machine, having the life force drained out of her. Now, obviously, considering the current situation, the Rangers don't really have much of a choice, so they agree to his demands. Billy manages to locate Kimberly, and using a portal device from season 2 when Tommy was in the dark dimension, he manages to teleport Tommy in there, and he actually fights Zed one-on-one, which is the only time you actually see Zed in hand-to-hand combat with the one of the Rangers. And to be honest, it's less a fight, more Zed just tossing Tommy around and actually openly mocking him at one stage. The only thing that really ultimately sees Tommy kind of win is the fact that he manages to use Saba to break Zed's staffs, forcing him to retreat. You get the feeling that if that hadn't have happened, Zed would have ultimately won the fight. Such is how powerful the guy is. So with Zed retreating, Tommy manages to free Kimberly, but she ultimately loses her Ranger powers. However, Billy does manage to use the power coins to override the controls for the Shogun Zords and restore them to the Zords controls. So they do now have a fleet of Zords that they can use. And we close out with a pretty nice scene between Tommy and Kimberly, which is effectively a parallel of when Tommy lost his powers. And like I say, it's just a nice moment between the pair of them. We then have the filler episode called Follow That Cab, which introduces some of Kat's backstory about how Rita kidnapped her when she first moved to America. And we also see Kimberly excited about the prospect of meeting a famous gymnastics coach called Gunther Schmidt. But we don't actually see him until the next episode, which leads into a three-parter called A Different Shade of Pink. So Garden Fisherman arrives while Kimberly is training, and she majorly fangirls over the guy, but he offers to train her for the Pan Global Games, which I assume is meant to be like the Power Rangers version of the Olympics, although they do actually mention the Olympics themselves as samurai, but I'd imagine it's that kind of caliber of competition given the way that they talk about it. This gives Rita an idea, not entirely surprisingly. She's going to keep Kimberly so busy between gymnastics training and fighting that she eventually becomes exhausted. We do also see over this multi-parter and follow that cab that Rita's spell over Kat is beginning to weaken a bit, and we see a few flashbacks to Kat's past and the fact that she is essentially a good person. And ultimately, we also see that Kat was actually meant to go to the Pan Global Games herself as a diver, but she had an accident. And at this point, the spell is ultimately broken. Kat realises what she's done and she runs into the youth centre to try and stop Kimberly, but unfortunately she is too late and Kimberly falls off the balance beam and hits her head, which is the end of part 1. In part 2, Kimberly is rushed into hospital for treatment, which is not something that you see too often. Naturally, Rita's pretty annoyed about the spell being broken, and Finster explains that Kat saving Kimberly was a completely selfless act, and the goodness of that act overrided the spell that Rita had placed on her. While the others are off fighting Rito and the Tengas, Kat admits the truth to Kimberly about the spell that she had been under and what she had done. At some stage, the others obviously come back and they overhear what's happened, and they forgive her, explaining to them that Tommy had a similar history of being turned evil. However, one thing Kat does neglect to mention is the fact that when Aisha and Kimberly were stroking their pet cat, it was actually her. That was clearly part of the spell as well, because she no longer does that. Rita demands that the Rangers turn over Kat or Ninja will be thrown into the Sea of Sorrow, yet another evil place that is mentioned as a one-off. Kat initially offers to turn herself in, but the Rangers refuse and come up with an idea to get Ninja back, but place a force field around Kat so that she is protected. However, Rita ends up double bluffing them, and rather than handing back Ninja, gives them an empty jar. And the Tengas destroy the force field that is protecting Kat and manage to kidnap her. Eventually, Kat does manage to free herself, although she has to go above and beyond because she ends up having to give Rito a back massage, which causes him to fall asleep, and she takes the key that was keeping her locked up, and during this massage, which has clearly relaxed him, he reveals that this glowing box that's in the room contains the pink power coin. So Kat manages to recover the coin, and the Rangers manage to teleport her to the command center. When Kimberly is getting out of hospital, she's clearly lost her confidence and eventually says that she's going to quit gymnastics, but Kat tries to make her reconsider, explaining about what happened to her with the diving accident. But she also later on tries to help Kimberly regain her own confidence by going on the sort of diving board and jumping off, basically proving that if she can overcome her fears, then so can Kimberly. This clearly works, and when the Rangers are throwing a party for her at the youth centre, Gunnar Schmidt invites Kimberly to move to his facility in Florida to train full-time for the Pan Globals. And after thinking about it pretty carefully, she accepts. And again, this I think shows how far Kimberly has come, because I think season 1 Kimberly would have just said, yep, I'm all over this, I'm going to the Pan Globals, see you later guys. But she genuinely considers giving up her lifelong dream. But Zordon says, look, you're always going to have to make sacrifices, but I never intended you to deprive you of this kind of life experience. So she agrees and chooses Kat to take her place as the Pink Ranger, which means 4 of the original 5 have now left, although this time it was handled a lot better. Now, one thing I have seen a few people comment on is the fact that on this occasion it was simply handing over the power coin, and they didn't need a big ceremony like they had in season 2, but this was actually explained in show. In the power transfer, Zordon explained that they needed the sword because of the large amounts of power that were involved. They were transferring the powers of 3 Rangers at the same time, whereas this time it was only one of them. So that's really the reason for the difference in how they went about it. We then see, once she does become a Ranger in later episodes, that Kat is not as accomplished a martial artist as the others. I did once read an interview with Catherine Sutherland, who played Kat, where she basically admitted that when it came to the martial arts part of the audition, she basically blagged it, but it clearly worked. But she does prove to be a valuable member of the team, and with her actions earlier on, she had shown the characteristics that I think made her a very good choice to be a Ranger. And after all, let's face it, Rita's spell over her wasn't broken by the Rangers in the same way that the spell over Tommy was broken because they destroyed his sword. With Kat, it was through her good nature shining through, and as Finster explained, by doing a selfless act. The last multi-parter that we get in the season is called Master Vile and the Metallic Armor. Master Vile is Rita and Russo's father and the ruler of the M51 galaxy. He announces his intention to harness the power of the Zeo Crystal, yet another mystical object that is mentioned in this show, which is hidden in a place called the Caves of Deception, which we learn is underneath Rita and Zed's palace. It's also explained by Zed that initially the palace was a place of good, but so it was actually Ninja that explained this. I stand corrected. That Rita and Zed ultimately corrupted the palace with their evil over time, but couldn't destroy the purity of the caves below it. Tommy and Kat travel to the moon in order to try and retrieve the crystal, and Kat distracts Rita and Zed by claiming that she's changed her mind and wants to be evil again. So they put her in this little device that Finster's made, which will turn her pure evil. While this is going on, Tommy makes the most of the distraction and travels down to the caves, which live up to their name because he has to face several illusions of his teammates, and it's revealed that the crystal can only be touched by somebody good. So Zed claims that Tommy won't be able to take it because of his own past, and when Tommy does eventually reach the crystal, we see it analyse his character, and we see that it does initially harm him when it reads his Green Ranger past, but when it eventually sees the good parts of him, particularly as the White Ranger, he's able to retrieve it, which also frees Cap from the evil machine, and they escape with the Falcon Zord, and at some stage Ninja does also escape as well. We do get a pretty impressive fight during this three-parter. You get to see multiple Megazords, multiple monsters doing battle, and it's just great to watch. And Master Vile does prove to be a pretty impressive threat to the Rangers in himself. The metallic armor itself is quite frankly barely worth covering, aside from being in the title of the three-parter. It's just shiny armor that doesn't really do much. We then come to Rangers in Reverse, where Master Vile comes up with another plan using the Orb of Doom to reverse time and turn the Rangers into children. Zed takes great delight in telling him that they already tried that back in season 2 and it didn't work then, but Master Vile insists that his plan is superior because he is older and wiser in the ways of evil. At the same time, the Rangers are planning a nice birthday surprise for Kat and take her to a carnival, but of course that is interrupted by Rito and the Tengas. But for once the Rangers are unsuccessful and Rito manages to plant the orb and time is reversed. One major difference between what happens here and what happened during the time reversal in season 2 is that this time the Rangers do actually retain their memories of everything, even though they no longer have their powers, or at least they don't at the moment. Now this leads into the Alien Ranger saga, which some people consider to be a separate mini-series, some people consider it to be part of season 3. I have always considered it to simply be a continuation of the 3rd season, and in the DVDs it even comes in its own separate disc, so I will discuss it here. Obviously without the Rangers having their powers, they need backup, so Zordon and Alpha call on the Alien Rangers from the planet Aquitar, which is a planet entirely underwater. The Alien Rangers agreed to come to Earth, although they do have to regularly find fresh water sources in order to rehydrate. So this does form a lot of Rita and Zed's plans throughout the mini-series to basically keep them out of the water and dry out so that they will have to return. And after the initial 2-parter that introduces the Alien Rangers, Master Vile is defeated and basically throws a strop and goes back to M51. So Rita and Zed are back in charge. Billy does what he does best and creates a device which uses the power coins, which is designed to revert the Rangers back to their regular ages. They use it on Billy himself and it works, transforming him back into David Yost. But before they can use it on the others, Goldar manages to steal it and Rita and Zed destroy the device and quite literally reduce the power coins to dust. So yeah, once again, the Rangers are pretty screwed, not for the first time in this season. After a couple more episodes, Zordon manages to locate the pieces of the Zero Crystal, which have apparently locked onto the Ranger's heritage. Just go with it. The remaining Kid Rangers go back in time in order to retrieve their pieces of the Zero Crystal. So we get to see a little bit about the heritage of each of the Rangers, which is a pretty nice touch. Adam, Rocky, Cat and Tommy all return with their parts of the crystal, but after Aisha retrieves hers in Africa, she opts to stay and sends a local girl called Tanya in her place. Personally, I think it's a shame that Karen Ashley didn't actually get an on-screen send-off as she had apparently been promised. But, it was ultimately her decision to leave the show at least. Now, while all this is going on, we get some fun and games with Goldar and Rito. Zed sends them to beneath the command center to try and find it and plant an implosion device. And despite being, Goldar and Rito, they do eventually manage to find it and plant the device. With all the Rangers back, Billy manages to put the Zero Crystal in place and Earth is returned to normal, with the Rangers all returned to their proper ages. Although, of course, Tanya is now a teenager, having been much younger in Africa. They also check on Aisha to make sure that she made it okay. But their joy is pretty short-lived, as while the Rangers are saying goodbye to the alien Rangers, Goldar and Rito come up from beneath the command center and steal the Zero Crystal. And it is at this point that the implosion device starts to go off and the Rangers are forced to escape from the command center as it blows up. The Rangers' base of operations for the last 3 years is no more, and the fate of Alpha and Zordon is left uncertain. Now, overall, I'd say that MMPR Season 3 is the strongest overall of the three. I think there was a really good narrative storyline that carried all the way through. The storyline is significantly improved for me. The fact that it is a shorter season and means there is less filler, and every Ranger, aside from Tanya for obvious reasons, does get some good character moments or developments. We talked about Bulk and Skull, and even Rocky, who was probably the least developed of the Stone Canyon trio, as you could call them, does get a nice filler episode where he has to swap places with his science teacher and gains an extra appreciation of just how hard teachers actually have it. So that was a nice moment. Now, in my last video, I mentioned that I felt Zed and Rita were better together than apart, despite the criticism from some people they had received. So I wanted to explain that here. So when Rita was in Soul Charge, she created the Green Ranger. Okay, fair enough. That went pretty well. When Zed was in Soul Charge, he destroyed the original Zords and permanently stripped Tommy of the Green Ranger powers. Pretty good. However, when they were together, they destroyed the Thunder Zords and powers, hospitalized Kimberly, destroyed the Ninja Zords and powers, and blew up the command center. So you would have to say they were much better as a pairing than separately. So that's my thoughts on Season 3. As always, I would love to know what you guys think, so please do get your views on the season in the comments down below. What did you enjoy about it? What did you not enjoy about it? What do you think they could have done slightly differently? I always love to hear what you guys' opinions are. Next time I'll be looking at Power Rangers Zeo, and from then on, things are going to be slightly different in many ways, not only from the show's point of view, but in terms of how I structure my reviews. Up until now, I've done one video on each season, but from now on, I will be doing multiple videos because I feel that there is so much plot that, you know, it justifies more than one video. I will probably do it in 2 parts, but I may do a third if I feel it is warranted on a particular season. And when we get to Turbo, I will do the movie in a separate video in itself. So that is what is coming up. If you have enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button, share the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and you are enjoying my content. But until next time, thank you so much again for watching and I'll catch you later.